Hello and welcome to the Broadcast Newswrap, keeping you across the biggest news in the world of TV. If you've been living under a rock for the past 5 years, you may not have noticed that the broadcasters are a little bit worried about those crafty 16 to 34-year-olds. But what is it like on the other side of the fence? Joining myself and Hannah Bowler this week are two millennial indie bosses, Brandon Relph and Dhanny Joshi, who discuss their experiences running a production company while simultaneously sitting within that elusive target market. All that, plus a youth-skewing version of what we've been watching on this week's Broadcast Newswrap. So Brandon, Dhanny, welcome. It's great to have you on the Newswrap this week. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
Good to have you here. So just by way of quick introduction, Dhanny Joshi founded BAFTA-nominated Big Deal Films in 2014 with Thomas Stogden. He has since worked with pretty much all of the broadcasters, most recently seeing BBC Three pick up the critically rated comedy slice Dreaming Whilst Black, which if you haven't seen it is well worth a watch. Brandon founded his company Studio B 2 years ago at the tender age of 19. Studio B counts its USP as flipping the AI model on its head, using AI to create content that can be personalized for global audiences on a granular level. Studio B has since worked with YouTube and other brands and also hosts the ZX Spectrum, an intergenerational podcast looking at tech, media, digital, and society. So look, first of all, I'm really keen to get to know why you guys decided to set up an indie in the first place. So Dhanny, you set your company up a bit longer ago than Brandon. So what was the thinking behind it?
I was deluded.
Apart from that.
Okay, so apart from delusion, why I started it is I was a talent manager first. So I managed an actor that went on to win a BAFTA. I was managing Hamza Arshad, who was at the time the UK's first big major YouTuber. And two things. Firstly, I was still working in a call center and earning as a manager wasn't paying me enough. And two, there was a huge shortage of opportunities for talent that were on screen that were of color. We just weren't getting any kickback. I felt the pedestal for diverse talent at the time was super high. They had to achieve ridiculous numbers, whereas I felt that our slightly lighter counterparts could get in the door a lot easier. So in my ignorance, just my frustration, I just said, okay, well, I'll be the production company. I'll work a way around this and I'll do your ideas and we'll get them through the door. And that's what I did. That's what got me to start anyway.
Brandon, how about yourself? You founded your company a little bit more recently.
Yeah, so it was kind of more of a kind of accidental sort of falling into it. I have an agent for lots of my speaking, so probably a talent manager similar to what Dhanny used to be. And my co-founder Lizzie and I had lots of concepts for content that we thought would work really well for young people on television. We saw that there was this big sort of gap in that, and Lizzie and I both have history in building companies and things like that, and our manager basically said, it's really hard to get stuff on screen. It's probably not going to happen. And I sat down with somebody that I knew from the television industry, a guy called Tony Dillon. And he was like, Brandon, you're like the most entrepreneurial person I know. Why don't you start and do something yourself? And so in all honesty, that's literally how it started. It started over a coffee from Lizzie and I going, this works. For us, let's try and let's do something different and new. And so we kind of, brought it all together, collaborated with lots of people in the industry. Lizzie and I had never made a minute of television in our life, although we had made stuff online. But, we were really sort of passionate and eager to see how could content be made better for young audiences.
Going back to what you just said about kind of reaching out to the rest of the industry, how did you negate kind of making those relationships?
In all honesty, lots of our chairman and stuff, I literally just sent cold emails.
Nice.
I was very fortunate. Prior to starting Studio B, I was a consultant, so I did have some contacts because I was consulting into some media companies before. But a lot of it was going to events. I first went to the Children's Media Conference in 2019 and met lots of people there, and then honestly lots of cold emails and reaching out to people and other people introducing them to other people. And, you know, I think I've had kind of an interesting pathway to do that. And, you know, I think it's, you know, lots nowadays you go and you look on the commissioning websites and things like that, lots of them are very open to be reached out directly. And I think that's what we found in our experience.
Did you have the same, Dhanny? Was that a lot of cold emails as well?
Yeah,
or you kind of benefited from being kind of already in the sector?
No, so I look back at some of the earlier emails that I used to send out, and I'm like, I didn't know you had such big balls. I was just, some of them, I look back with awe and I'm like, wow, you had some front, Dhanny boy. But yeah, no, that was just the actual truth. I had the ultimate belief that I needed to be heard. And I didn't worry so much about why they wouldn't want to hear me out. I just thought, why not just shoot my shot and just reach out? So yeah, like Brandon did as well, a lot of cold emails in the beginning. And I would keep it very quick. Look, give me 15 minutes and I'll let you know why I'm going to make you loads of money. And that was my initial pitch to everyone, to producers that we wanted to work with, to channels who I felt we could make great shows for. And you know, honestly, there was of course some blanks and some no answers, but there also were some people that would, for every 10 that didn't get back to me, there was that one that would. And when we got that one that would, we'd make sure we over deliver. Actually, how I even got in the door as well with, and just playing, and this is just looking at the using your front and just like, you know, having a bit of bravado. So there was a channel called London Live that started back early 2014, and they wanted Hamza on their channel. Hamza's the guy that I manage. And this is when we were thinking about setting up Big Deal Films, and it was in our head to do it, but we just were waiting for the right opportunity. And a gentleman called Darren Lawford, who's now the creative director at Woodcut Media, he reached out, and I said to him, I said, Darren, look, and again, I didn't know who he was. I said, look, you can have the show only if we produce it. And I wasn't familiar with negotiations with TV executives like that. But, and I said, on top of that, you've got to listen to our ideas as well. And if you like our ideas, you've got to give us a commission. And we turned up in suits. I didn't know about dressing like a TV person back then. So when I tell you I went in a suit, I mean, I was looking good, right? And the waistline was a little bit more friendly back then as well, right? I wasn't aware of the +30s metabolism that you get. But anyways, get in there, go in there with fully fledged treatments. I knew that he might discount our experience, but I would attach PDs, editors, executive producers, whatever. But I would over deliver with that one person that would take us, you know, give us a shot, and then that's how we became born. But definitely just taking the risk and thinking, whatever, just do it.
And it feels like from both of your experiences that there's no real blueprint to this stuff. Like, it feels like you almost have to make the mistakes or just try and do it your way in order to eventually work out how to do it.
Yeah, well, I think definitely for us both, you know, not to speak too much to you, Dhanny, but obviously we both didn't come to, I think the traditional route to owning an indie is you work your way up the sort of level, you become exec producer, and then you sort of spin off and start your own indie. I think we've both found sort of non-traditional paths there. But I think, you know, if anything, I think that gives us kind of a different kind of outlook and a different skill set. I mean, something that I've been really excited in this last year is looking at, you know, new techniques and new ways we can create content. And, you know, from talking to other people across the industry, it's kind of like, oh, this isn't how it's done. And it's like, well, maybe this is how it should be done.
Yeah, I never studied media studies. I tried it at AS level, and then I dropped it after the first year. It was an easier A level to get. What I did have was instincts, and I could spot talent. And I was aware of my skill set, which was I had a big mouth and I was very persistent. So, you know, if you put me in a room, I'll always say I'm the least talented person you will ever meet, right? But I spot talent. One thing I can do is I'll know who's good, and then I'll see how I can pair that person up with this person who might be able to help out. And that was my route to market. I partnered up with the first ever music artist that I was managing. I said, look, you've got ideas, even if they're not in the music realm anymore, you're still a creative person. You love TV. You're always talking about TV and film. I made an introduction for him to go meet a production company, and then I just carried on doing my navigation. But I hire people way more qualified than I am. My God, I mean, sometimes I meet Oxford, Cambridge people, and I'm just like, damn, man, I've got 6 GCSEs. That was 3 Bs and 3 Cs. How the hell did
I love that. I think my always perspective has been I kind of come from the businessy side and the creative side, and I mean in my first kind of career and my first startup, I was I literally used to make video games, and I used to make online shows around Minecraft, and I think it I think we both have very different skill sets, but there's been lots and lots of talk, especially in the last year, of the sort of demise of television and things like that. But I think it takes innovators and people, new thinking to sort of approach those issues and approach those challenges.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you feel like you're sought out by the broadcasters that are kind of trying to crack the 16 to 34? Do you feel like you're kind of like hot property to be able to kind of bring them what they're looking for in terms of trying to crack that space?
I would love to say yes, but I don't know if it's the same for you, Dhanny. But we do get pushback, and I think anybody and everybody deals with pushback in their careers. I think because we have a different model and a different way, at Studio B, we very much think about ideas on a global stage and things like that. And I think it can sometimes be a bit of a frightful jump for the commissioners. But I think we're in a situation right now where we've done lots of the preparation work. Obviously COVID had a big impact on the industry and on us, and I think that we're ready to go raring out the gates and become the hot property. But I think there'll be a time where that will happen, but I think broadcasters right now are a bit more focused on survival than innovation.
Definitely.
Sure. I think for us, we are known for young audiences with some of our unscripted and scripted shows. We're known for bringing diverse, quote unquote, diverse audiences for our shows as well. And I think they kind of expect that from us now. So I think over the last few years, we've almost shown ourselves to be somewhat of an authority on this. And I think that's actually through the talent that we work with, because these talents that we work with obviously have audiences. Those audiences are young. We worked with Michael Dapper and we did his series Swill. Michael Dapper had the popular Big Shaq character, and his audience was 16 to 24 and massively popular. So I think how we established ourselves as being this company that knows young audiences was through the talent that we were aligning with. Hamza has a massively popular character called Badman, who we work with. So what we would do as well is every time we had any kind of productions, we would always make sure that was communicated to the press. God bless Broadcast Magazine. But it allowed us to carve out an identity that the channels would then start take notice of. And you do treat the channels as though they're stupid sometimes, in the sense of like, guys, I'm giving you this on a plate. And we have had that in the past. But I think, Brandon, no doubt you'll have this as you move forward as well, is you get a few wins and you start to get that trust, and then start to become that person, and eventually you'll be that company. And no doubt, I mean, I'm well impressed by you now. Jesus Christ, when you get to my age. I think with that consistency and with that delivering, you'll get there.
I think that there's very much consistencies in our approach as well with the talent. I've grown up watching lots of online creators and been very much in that. And I think one of our core focuses has been over the past couple of years has been to mature and build those relationships with those, content creators and younger talent in the industry. And I could, quite confidently say now that I could call up most of them and have them, come onto a project pretty quickly, because we have all those relationships. And I think, what we kind of found, and I don't know what your experience has been, Dhanny, but what we sort of found early on is that some of the, the best ideas for young audiences come from young people themselves, and come from, those creators online that have built audiences because they know what audiences want. And so lots and lots of my job is literally just to sit there and listen and to, turn those into a bit more of a television ready and a, broadcast ready idea. I think that's I think I'm in agreement that talent is kind of what underpins everything.
I'm noticing more actually with the channels that we're speaking to, that they all want talent. They all want who's the talent attached. Today I was asked by a channel, we were speaking to this talent and they've got 4 million followers, and it seems as though that's really the currency that they're speaking at the moment. It was actually quite refreshing. Sometimes it could be frustrating, like, oh my God, we're not going to find this talent. On the flip side, just knowing that, okay, cool, if that's their route to market, because they're now trying to convert users to go to their online platform, it makes sense. So I take encouragement from it, really, but it is I think that's just the direction everything is moving forward in, to be honest.
And I think for creators online as well, they still very much look to traditional television and traditional media as a, the next step or the next, sort of level. So we're, always inundated, but I like to always say that we as a company like to be extremely creative first. So if you come to us with an idea, we will work with you with that idea. I think what's happened in the industry, in the last 5 years or so, is that commonly creators are taken and essentially just sort of propped on a screen as a presenter or as some piece of talent that uses for a subsection to get those clicks or something like that. And we actually feel, they need to be treated, as the talent that they actually are. For a lot of online creators, their talent base moves much wider than just being an on-screen talent. They have so many skills behind the scenes, and they have such creative minds. And I almost see online creators as the sort of people that would probably have ended up in television anyway, and now are instead building their own media empires online. And it's how can we bridge the gap between the two?
Yeah, it has been tricky there's been quite a few examples where like a channel has just taken a YouTube creator and put them on a show, and it hasn't landed and it hasn't worked. So it is interesting to work out how to kind of nurture them in a way that can keep the show alive, because it has happened a lot of times where it's kind of not played off, and why that is quite interesting.
Yeah, well, we've literally walked away from commissions and development money because of the channels come in and said, we want to do this instead, but we really like that talent and the connection that you have, but we want to do this instead. And we've gone, no, that's not what we're about. We for example made a very conscious decision at the start of the pandemic that we weren't going to make any pandemic shows. It wasn't the ethos of what our company was about. And I think similarly, we believe that creators fundamentally understand their audience best. And if you're hiring us as a channel to essentially target and find that audience, that's kind of what we're good at. And I don't know what your experience has been, Dhanny.
Having worked with, say, Michael Dapper, for example, we've seen channels say, look, we like what you're doing, and we'll give you, we'll offer you a show, and it will be like a pilot. And it's like, guys, you're talking about a comedian, you're talking about a talent that's got millions of followers, 300 million views and whatnot. And what you're offering just has to match the caliber of talent that you're dealing with. And like with talent like that, they make more money off their platform, their YouTube platform, than they will off any kind of appearance fee. And I think sometimes the balance in power gets lost. And I feel it doesn't really help the ecosystem. Okay, some talent will ask for astronomical money, and that's just not sustainable either. But I think sometimes the platforms or the channels do need to be aware of what the talent is really bringing, and agree. And at the same time, I've also been in situations where working with the talent, a different talent, hasn't necessarily translated into the response that we wanted on iPlayer or on Tube. You'll think that talent's going to bring a ton of viewers over. He's got 1 million subscribers. He's going to bring 1 million people over to the platform. Doesn't always happen. If you don't give them what they want, sometimes you can make the mistake of, because they're talent, you think, I'm going to put them on the platform. They'll do what we want them to do, or they'll do what the channel wants them to do, and it will just naturally translate. Not going to happen.
I think it's an interesting, almost kind of argument around it as well, is the fact that I think, when you're using talent like that there's not going to be 100% hit rate, and it's not going to be there, because even if, we remove that and in regular television programming, if we take out creators and things like that, you don't have an 100% hit rate anyway. But I feel like sometimes there's an expectation that there should be an 100% hit rate with creators and with digital talent, when it's kind of not on the same, it's not held to the same standards as every other program on television.
They want that instant gratification. They want that quick hit. Oh, this person's got a ton of followers, we'll get it. No, you have to really make sure your idea is the one. You have to really develop that. You have to take the person on a journey. And yeah, I think that's a mistake that even I'm guilty of thinking. I made a TV show 5-6 years ago called All About the Bands for ITV. It was a hidden camera show, and we had Tinchy Strider hosting it. Tinchy had just come off the back of being one of the fan favorites on I'm a Celebrity. We also had Aaron Kraskell, who is a Facebook comedian who has millions of followers. We had London Hughes. So London Hughes, who's super popular now, we had her on the show, and maybe a couple more talents. And I thought, okay, we've covered mainstream TV, we've covered social media, we've covered all of these things. We've covered specialist audiences at the time, and we're going to get a hit here. And we got great in social interaction, but it wasn't a hit, right? It wasn't a hit. That was a mistake I made, and thinking, oh, great. And then if I thought about it, the show was okay. I missed some basic beats in the hidden camera way of working. But yeah, even putting the content aside, I did think, oh, social media, we're going to get it. It's going to work. And it didn't work. And I was actually better off just leaving them to their devices and probably hiring some actors who were really good at hidden camera and just sticking to the formula of what a show should be, rather than thinking I could engineer the views and I could get the hits, and it didn't work out. So that was a learning curve for me there as well.
It's really interesting the way it sounds like you sort of have to learn from each other, almost like the more established older commissioners and then you guys, and kind of like bringing it together. But as quite a kind of meaty question, obviously, I think, like I said at the top of the show, that like the 16 to 34 conundrum sort of is the conundrum almost of our, like, it feels of the past like few years at least. It's like, how do you get this age bracket to continue interacting with traditional broadcasters? And sometimes it feels like they're trying to move too fast. Sometimes wrong steps are made on the way. But how do you guys think the traditional broadcasters are getting on with the 16 to 34 demographic at the moment?
I would say, if we look at the picture as a whole, pretty bad. I think 16 to 34 is maybe a bit too big of a category that they focus on anyway. I think the drop off at the moment that we found, and we've done, lots of research in this area, is that, British television does children's content incredibly well, and it has done for at least my lifetime and far, far beyond that. And they tend to do specific programming, for older people very well as well. But there's this big drop-off zone in between. And I think some of the broadcasters are starting to realize, but don't really know how to act in that space. But it's really kind of what we focus on, which is that sort of 12 to 24s. And in the sort of marketing world, they'll refer to them as Generation Z. And they're the ones that are, myself included, have grown up with the internet and with online, and shifting over quicker than ever over to Netflix and YouTube, etc. And I think BBC are making maybe positive steps with BBC Three returning. Channel 4 has always, I think, had hits and misses in that category. But I think, generally speaking, broadcasters aren't really doing too fab of hitting that demographic. Shows that are really big and relevant for young audiences, like Sex Education, for example, which was shopped around all the broadcasters in the UK, ended up on Netflix because none of the broadcasters would take that risk. But it was a fantastic show that hit that demographic perfectly. And so, I think, I don't know if it goes down to the fact that the people that are making the decisions at the broadcasters just don't understand young audiences. I've been to kind of pitching event and different things where they put up screen full of influencers they've worked on, and half of them I wouldn't even cast as influencers. I would call them traditional celebrities that found their fame on television. And I don't know if I think there's a big disconnect between, what young audiences want from their content and what they're getting on broadcast.
And it feels like, not for the want of trying, right? Like everything. Sometimes I feel like the more the broadcasters try, almost the worse it becomes. Like the more you deliberately try and prioritize this demographic, if you don't quite know what you're doing, then you can sort of land yourself in hot water almost.
I think they try, but I think they kind of try in the wrong way. And it's commonly like, it's kind of like, the problem that we think is that young people aren't involved in the creation of shows, and so they keep going back to the same echo chambers and asking them to make content for young people, and they don't speak to, and maybe they are doing that more now, but they don't speak to people like Dhanny and myself who are doing this and do understand this. I think it's kind of difficult to get stuck in the same echo chambers in that way. And I think interestingly, there's a shift in the hires that the SVoDs are making as well, that they're hiring more traditional TV folk. And I think they've got to keep their eye and make sure that this doesn't happen there as well. But to their credit, they're also, aware of that and are making efforts towards that. But I think really, I kind of see some of the content that goes out on, say, BBC Three, and I'm like, I don't know where you kind of thought this would ever hit. And then you wonder why it's sort of cancelled after one series and doesn't pick up an audience.
How about you, Dhanny? You talked a little bit earlier about gaining that reputation for content that skews young. So how do you think the broadcasters are getting on?
Okay, so hit and miss. I'm only getting traction now after years of plugging away, right? I think the difference between why it happened now versus why it didn't happen earlier on is the channels hired younger. They hired people that were closer to my demographic, closer to my age group, and who, number one, understood the talent, number two, understood audience patterns in terms of behaviors outside of television. So what they're into. So we had a show called Scam Stories that was on BBC Three last month. And that was a show about how young people get scammed. And actually the 16 to 34 demographic is the most, especially the 20s to 30s, are the most scammed age group, even more so than elderly people. And that's essentially BBC Three's audience, right? And it took a commissioner that was fairly young, probably my age, maybe 40 even, but that's still, like, by commissioner standards, that's somewhat young. She got it, and she understood that the kids getting scammed, the young people getting scammed, are the same demographic that would watch BBC Three, that would watch a rap game, for example, that would watch Glow Up and whatnot. So I think when you're somewhat aware of what your audience does outside of just watching TV, that starts to help you understand your customer. And so I've realized that with Scam Stories, that's worked. I mean, I hope they give us a series. We outperformed expectations anyway, so here's hoping that. But I do think that they need to keep on hiring younger. Have young people in the office, have young people in the building, have young people in the commissioning process, because I think you need that perspective. You need to stay grounded. And I'm not going to know everyone that's young. I'm 35, right? Mm-hmm. Brandon, how old are you?
I'm 20.
Jesus Christ, do I feel like a diva? But I think I need to be around people like Brandon, because he's going to know about behaviors that I'm not going to know about, right? And so I think you constantly have to be, there's no hierarchy, there's no snobbishness. It's literally keep everyone in the mix, keep your young people in the mix, because they're going to know what's going on. If I wanted to do stuff for BBC Two, I'm aware of their demographic. I'm probably going to have some people older than me, and probably that might have gone to even a different school than me, in the room when I'm trying to get into that mindset of who that customer is. So yeah, I think it varies.
Having young people in the room is important, and I think, but equally important is empowering them and listening to them. In my past life, when I used to travel a lot and do speeches and things like that, my one piece of advice to people when trying to engage with young audiences is to sit in a room and listen to them and talk to them, because not enough people at big marketing agencies and similarly at broadcasters spend time doing that. You look at, say, the Netflix model of working, which is of freedom and responsibility. Within their organization, essentially anybody can speak up and talk and give their opinions. Whereas, in a more traditional hierarchy, and you hire young talent in and then you don't listen to them, it's very easy to not listen to them. Whereas, so, I don't know if there's shifts that need to happen in organizations to allow that to be, but yeah, I probably haven't spoken to commissioners that are anywhere close to my age. So
I think you'd struggle to find it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I think you must be the youngest person in television, Brandon.
Do you guys have any other people kind of similar age? Do you kind of have any networks where you can chat to people and talk about how it's different for you guys? Do you have any community around you?
Not so much in the television industry. I mean, I think in the wider business and industry there definitely is. I volunteer a lot with the charity Young Enterprise, and so I spend a lot of my life being embedded and talking to young people, that are in school, just coming out of school, in university and things like that. People that are my age are still in university, and so I spend, a lot of my friends, so to speak, of a younger age and are watching that sort of the content that we want to kind of hit. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if I'm one of the younger ones in the television industry. And I wouldn't say there's necessarily super strong networks for that right now. Maybe there is, but I haven't come across them. On the counter side, we have an advisory board and a chairman and such that is significantly older than me, and even my co-founder is older than me as well. And I think we like to bring kind of the mixture of youthful thinking, but also kind of knowledge and expertise that I maybe lack, and sort of bring that into a wider picture.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's hard time to be a young person in TV, for sure. So it's encouraging to hear all of this. And it feels like one of the lessons to take away from today is different generations need to work together, for sure, to come up with the best ideas. And are you guys finding yourselves speaking a lot to sort of quote unquote youth skewing platforms? So are there new platforms out there where you're constantly pitching ideas?
Kind of. I think it's a real variety. We've spent a lot of the last year focusing on bringing in talent and bringing in people, and then cultivating relationships. But I think as a company, we're more excited of working with the traditional players and changing those than the newer players, so to speak. And so we don't really work directly for content on YouTube, for example, because that's kind of not our forte right now. But I think we as a company like to go after kind of opportunities and bigger wins rather than quicker wins.
Yeah, no, agreed. We definitely go for the bigger picture over here as well. I think we paid our dues by taking the lower hanging fruit, as and when we needed to, one for company survival, and just making sure the bills are paid. And then they got a point where we're like, we don't want to just be taking the scraps here. And I think when we got our first 1 hour and we could see the budgets that we were playing with, we're like, okay, you don't want to then go back to minimum wage after that, So we just kept on going and going and going. And that brought a shift in our thinking space as well. And at the same time, we were in talks with Channel 4 who wanted to invest in us. And then naturally, when you've got investors on board, they want you to be going for those big 1 hours, those big returnable series and so forth. So I think that also helped push us to be wanting more as well, and targeting the big players more, and actually holding the commissioners to account as well, and the channels to account. Like, look, we've paid our dues. We very much can deliver. But it took us to deliver. We had ITV, Funny Black and On TV. It exceeded the channel average for that slot, and I made sure that everyone knew about it, channel-wise and stuff. And then, from there, we got more work off the back of that. So, and also just to go back to the previous point as well, in terms of networks, my network, there's not many companies that are say my generation, but, I'll speak to Alex Siegel over at Intertalent, who runs the ship over there. He's very in tune with talent, and I obviously have that talent management background, so I can bounce ideas off with him. Equally, he can then also keep me in the loop with the talent that they're excited about and working on. And me and him have just developed, a real good friendship in terms of what's going on in the other person's industry and what we need to be thinking about, what we need to be knowing about. And I think that's the network that I have. There are some people that are older than me that have production companies, and I do tap to them for advice as well. We have agents now as well over at CAA. So we'll talk to them and bounce ideas to us, because there's wisdom in some of the stuff they're talking. I can get a lot of value from their experiences.
100%. Yeah.
We might have, then we might be at different places now in terms of what the ecosystem's like now versus back then. But the art of negotiation is timeless. The how to not let your ego take over is timeless. So, working with older people, I love it just as much, because there is so much knowledge I can take from them and that I can apply to my business. But equally as well, working with the youngers, I can apply my knowledge and know-how to them as well, but also learn from them.
Yeah, I think I completely agree, Dhanny. I think that there's this kind of, we realized this really early on. I think there needs to be this mixture of generations and this mixture of work. Most of the people that we have on our advisory board are all, kind of retired from the television industry or more in consultancy roles, have, been previous commissioners or have been, previous from the legal side of things. And I think I always find some of the most insightful conversations to have are with people that are older. But I think we can, it's about, I think for us, we've been very fortunate that we haven't had to go after, small things that would only pay minimum wage, so to speak, because, Lizzie and I kind of have financial backing. But I think you always want to think big. Commissioners need to think big as well, and they need to, take those risks, because, fundamentally that's what business is about.
Well, thanks, guys. I think we'll wrap up there. We just have a little bit of time left to do our cheeky little segment, which is what we've been watching. But I thought maybe it might be an interesting thing to maybe get you guys' views on some shows that skew a bit younger that you've watched that have kind of nailed it a bit. So yeah, Dhanny, maybe kick off. Not to put you on the spot.
So just caveat this as well. This might be where I embarrass myself and say, I haven't seen that. But go on. I'm all for playing though.
Go for it. Kick off. What have you seen lately?
Last Chance You on Netflix. Yeah, love that show. The all access hilarious, basketball, warts and all. Underdog. I love an underdog story. So I love that. Yeah, Brandon, your turn.
I could probably throw off a cut. I mean, the big one that I think's being broadcast right now that I've been loving is obviously Line of Duty, which I think everybody's been loving, no matter your age. I think one of the big hits for me in the last year has been Bridgerton. And I think how that brought modern themes, into a period setting just works so, sort of intrinsically well, I think, for sort of any age group. I've watched the show and equally my mum's watched it, and I think a show that is done incredibly well for young audiences has got to be RuPaul's Drag Race. I think it was a spark of genius to bring that in a UK setting. My only sort of sadness about it all is that they didn't give it a broadcast slot, because it could have been such a better viewing experience and a community feel if they would have given it a spot on a television channel. So I hold out hope that it will find its home maybe on BBC Three. But in all honesty, it's such a good show. They should have put it on BBC One.
And it's interesting you say Line of Duty as well, because it just feels like so many people watch it that it naturally captures every demographic. But I think its share increase is just as much for 16 to 34-year-old viewers as it is for any other demographic.
Yeah. I've watched Line of Duty since the start. I was a huge fan of Bodyguard and lots of other shows Jed did. And I think it just goes to show, I think that good stories translate across generations. And I think one of the most exciting things that Line of Duty sort of brought is that element of suspense that you get across the nation. And I don't know if a drama has quite done that in recent memory. The idea of at the end of, an episode a couple of weeks ago of, who is she related to? Who is that connection? And those sort of discussions spark across social media and capture so many people. And I think that's kind of what will bring success in broadcasting in the future. And that's fundamentally why Line of Duty has been so successful, is just because of amazing writing that leaves audiences in suspense.
Good stuff. Well, it's been such a pleasure listening to the two of you. I found it super insightful. So thanks so much. We'd love to have you on again sometime soon.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for having us.
You have a good day. Enjoy, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcast News Wrap with the fantastic duo of Dhanny Joshi and Brandon Relph of Big Deal Films and Studio B fame. I've been Max Goldbart and I've been co-hosting with Hannah Bowler. This podcast was edited by Hannah Bowler. You can check out all 43 past episodes of the pod on Spotify and iTunes, or on the website via www.broadcastnow.co.uk.